The moon hung low over Millbrook like a judge's gavel, pale and unforgiving. Aria pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of her cottage, listening to the voices gathering in the village square. She knew what tonight meant. Everyone did. The first frost had come early this year, and with it, the debt collectors. Aria! Her mother's voice was barely a whisper, weak from months of illness. Don't go out there, please. Aria turned from the window, her heart breaking at the sight of the woman who had once been strong enough to carry water buckets up from the well without breaking a sweat. Now, Margaret's skin stretched thin over her bones, her eyes sunken into dark hollows. The fever had taken everything but her spirit. I have to, Mama. Aria knelt beside the bed, taking her mother's cold hand. Elder Thorne sent word. All families with debts must present themselves tonight. They're going to take you. Margaret's fingers tightened with surprising strength. I know what these selections really are. The girls who leave never come back. That's just superstition. It's truth. Margaret struggled to sit up, and Aria quickly placed another thin pillow behind her back. My grandmother told me stories about the trades, the auctions, the men who come from the cities with gold in their pockets and darkness in their hearts. Aria smoothed her mother's gray-streaked hair, forcing a smile she didn't feel. I'll be fine. Maybe they just need workers for the harvest in the southern provinces. A season away, and I'll earn enough to pay our debts and buy your medicine. They both knew it was a lie. The church bell tolled 1, 2, 3 times. The summoning. Aria stood, straightening her only good dress. It was plain brown cotton, patched at the elbows, but clean. She had washed it that morning, as if cleanliness might make her less desirable somehow, as if anything could. I love you, Mama. She kissed her mother's forehead, tasting salt from tears she didn't remember shedding. Come back to me, Margaret whispered. Promise me you'll find a way back. Aria couldn't make that promise, so she said nothing, closing the door softly behind her and stepping into the cold October night. The village square was already crowded. Torches blazed in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across the cobblestones. Aria recognized most of the faces: farmers, craftsmen, widows, all bearing the same expression of resignation mixed with fear. But it was the girls who caught her attention, 12 of them, ranging from perhaps 15 to 25 years old. They stood in a rough line near the platform where Elder Thorne conducted village business. Some cried quietly, others stared at nothing, shock written across their features. All of them were poor. All of them were alone, without fathers or brothers to protect them. Aria Miller. Elder Thorne's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. He stood on the platform, flanked by 2 men Aria had never seen before. City men, by the look of their fine coats and polished boots. Step forward. Her legs felt like water, but she moved. The crowd parted around her, and she felt their eyes. Sympathy from some, relief from others. Relief that it wasn't their daughter, their sister, their wife standing in the selection line. She took her place at the end of the row of girls. To her right stood Hannah, the baker's daughter, her face blotchy from crying. It'll be all right, Aria whispered, though she had no reason to believe it. Hannah just shook her head. Elder Thorne cleared his throat, a wet, rattling sound. He was ancient, older than anyone in the village, with eyes like chips of flint and a mouth that rarely smiled. Tonight, however, he wore something almost resembling satisfaction. Families of Millbrook, he began, his voice carrying across the silent square. We gather tonight under circumstances both difficult and necessary. Our village has accumulated significant debt to the Commerce Guild of the 5 cities. Debts for grain during the drought, debts for medicine during the plague, debts that must be paid. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew about the debts. What they didn't know was how the elder planned to settle them. Fortunately, Thorne continued, gesturing to the 2 strangers beside him, representatives from the guild have come with a proposal, a way to clear our obligations and secure Millbrook's future prosperity. One of the strangers stepped forward. He was tall, perhaps 40 years old, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes the color of winter ice. His clothes spoke of wealth, a burgundy coat with silver buttons, black leather gloves, boots that probably cost more than Aria's cottage. but it was his smile that made her skin crawl. It never reached his eyes. "Good people of Millbrook," the stranger said, his voice smooth as oil. "My name is Marcus Thornwell. I represent several prominent households and businesses throughout the 5 cities. We have need of workers, housekeepers, companions, assistants. In exchange for volunteers to fill these positions, I am prepared to pay handsomely, enough to clear your village's entire debt, with surplus for improvements to your roads and wells. Workers." The word hung in the air like smoke. "How much?" someone called from the crowd. "How much for each girl?" Marcus's smile widened. "That depends on the individual. Some positions require specific qualities. But rest assured, no one will be taken against their will. This is a voluntary exchange." Voluntary. Another lie, more obvious than Aria's promise to return home. "And what happens to the girls?" This voice belonged to old Peter, the blacksmith. He stood near the front, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "Where do they go? What kind of work?" "Domestic service, primarily," Marcus answered smoothly, "though some may be trained in more specialized roles. Secretarial work, hostessing, estate management. All positions come with room, board, and a small salary. After 1 year of service, they may choose to return home or continue their employment." A year. It might as well have been forever. Elder Thorne raised his hand for silence. "The selection process is simple. Mr. Thornwell and his associate will interview each candidate. Those chosen will receive their placements tonight. Families will receive their portion of the payment immediately, with the remainder going to settle village debts." "This is wrong," old Peter's voice boomed across the square. "You're selling these girls like cattle." "I'm saving this village," Thorne snapped back. "Would you prefer we all starve come winter? That we watch our children waste away because we can't afford grain? This is survival, Peter. Sometimes survival requires sacrifice." "Sacrifice of our daughters?" "Enough." Marcus's voice cut through the argument like a blade. He descended from the platform, his boots clicking on the cobblestones as he approached the line of girls. "Let's make this easier for everyone. I'll make my selections, pay the agreed sums, and be gone before midnight. Those not chosen can return to their families. Simple." He began at the far end of the line, away from Aria. She watched as he examined each girl, checking their hands, their teeth, asking questions in a low voice. Some he dismissed with a wave, others he marked in a small leather notebook. The process was methodical, cold. He rejected more than he accepted, and Aria felt a terrible hope rising in her chest. Maybe she wouldn't be chosen. Maybe she could go home to her mother, find another way to earn money for medicine. "Your name?" Marcus stood before her suddenly, and Aria realized she'd been lost in thought. "Aria. Aria Miller, sir." Those cold eyes examined her face, and she forced herself not to look away. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought. Lines creased the corners of his eyes and mouth, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been denied anything he wanted. Hands. She held them out. He turned them over, noting the calluses from washing laundry, the small scar on her thumb from a kitchen accident years ago. "You work hard." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, sir. I take care of my mother. She's ill." He released her hands. "And your father?" "Dead. Mining accident 5 years ago." "Brothers? Sisters?" "No, sir. Just Mama and me." Marcus made a note in his book. "How old are you?" 22. "Education?" "I can read and write. Basic arithmetic. My mother taught me." He circled her slowly, and Aria felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. She kept her breathing steady, her posture straight. Whatever he was looking for, she prayed she didn't have it. "You're pretty," he said finally, stopping in front of her again. "Not conventionally beautiful, perhaps, but there's something—" "Yes, you'll do nicely." Terror flooded through her. "Sir, Your mother needs medicine, correct? Expensive medicine that you cannot afford?" Aria's mouth went dry. How did he know? Marcus smiled, reading her expression. Elder Thorne was very thorough in his reports. "Your mother has wasting sickness. Without treatment, she has perhaps 2 months. With treatment, she might live years. Isn't that right?" She wanted to deny it, but couldn't. "Yes." I'll make you an offer, Aria Miller. Come with me tonight. Enter my service willingly, and I'll ensure your mother receives the finest medical care available. A physician will visit her weekly. Medicine will be provided at no cost. She'll want for nothing. And if I refuse, his smile vanished. Then the village debt remains unpaid. Elder Thorne will be forced to seize property to cover it, starting, I imagine, with your cottage. Your mother will be turned out, left to whatever charity the village can spare, which, in my experience, is very little. It wasn't a choice. It had never been a choice. How long? Aria's voice sounded distant, as if someone else was speaking. How long would I need to serve? Standard contract is 5 years. 5 years. Not one, as he'd told the crowd. 5 years of her life, traded for her mother's survival. And after? I can come home? If you wish. Marcus's cold smile returned. Though most find they prefer their new lives. I provide very comfortable accommodations for those who serve me well. Aria looked past him, toward the cottage where her mother lay dying. She thought of Margaret's thin hand in hers, the way her mother's eyes had pleaded. Come back to me. She thought of her father, crushed in the mines working to pay debts that should never have existed. She thought of every girl in this village who had disappeared over the years, swallowed by the cities and never heard from again. And she thought, maybe I can find a way back. Maybe I can survive this. I'll go, she heard herself say. I'll enter your service willingly, but you must promise, swear, that my mother will be cared for. You have my word. Marcus extended his gloved hand. Shall we seal the agreement? Aria stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff into darkness, she took it. His grip was cold, even through the leather. Excellent, Marcus said, turning to address Elder Thorne. I'll take 5 of them. The Miller girl, Hannah Walsh, Rebecca Stone, Claire Moore, and Sarah Jennings. Prepare the contracts. 5 lives, purchased with gold. The next hour passed in a blur. Contracts were signed, or marked with an X, by those who couldn't write. Families received their payments in heavy leather pouches, the clink of gold coins somehow obscene in the quiet square. Some parents wept. Others pocketed the money with expressions of relief that made Aria's stomach turn. Her mother's payment went to Elder Thorne, who promised to arrange the physician's visits. Aria didn't trust him, but what choice did she have? The 5 chosen girls were loaded into a covered wagon. No one said goodbye. The villagers had already turned away, eager to forget what they'd witnessed, what they'd allowed to happen. As the wagon began to roll, Aria looked back one last time at Millbrook, at the only home she'd ever known. She saw old Peter standing alone in the square, his face carved from stone, saw smoke rising from cottage chimneys, saw the church steeple pointing toward heaven like an accusation. Then the village disappeared around a bend in the road, and there was only darkness. The wagon traveled for hours, heading south toward the mountains. None of the girls spoke. What was there to say? They were cargo now, purchased and paid for, being delivered to their new master. Marcus rode his horse ahead of the wagon, accompanied by his associate, a quiet man who hadn't spoken once during the entire selection process. 2 more men drove the wagon, rough-looking individuals who kept crossbows within easy reach. Around midnight, they reached a clearing deep in the forest. Ancient trees surrounded the space, their branches forming a cathedral ceiling overhead. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, worn smooth by centuries of weather. Out, one of the drivers commanded, pulling back the wagon's canvas cover. The girls climbed down on shaking legs. Aria's whole body ached from the journey, but it was fear that made her knees weak. This wasn't a way station. This wasn't a rest stop. This was something else entirely. Marcus dismounted, removing his gloves as he approached the altar. Line up, he ordered. This won't take long. What is this place? Hannah whispered beside Aria. Why have we stopped? Before anyone could answer, Marcus began to speak, not in the common tongue, but in something older. Words that seemed to echo strangely in the clearing, as if the forest itself was listening. The air grew colder. Frost spread across the ground, crackling toward the altar. He's performing a ritual, Aria realized with dawning horror. This isn't about domestic service. This was never about domestic service. Marcus's voice rose, the strange words flowing faster. He drew a knife from his belt. Not a weapon, but something ceremonial, the blade etched with symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. "When I call your name," he said, switching back to common tongue, "you will approach the altar and place your hand upon it. Do not resist. Do not run. My men have orders to shoot anyone who tries." Sarah Jennings was first. She walked to the altar like someone in a trance, her face blank with shock. When she placed her hand on the stone, Marcus made a small cut on her palm. Blood dripped onto the altar, and the symbols flared with sickly green light. "Property of House Thornwell," Marcus intoned. "Bound by blood and contract, so witnessed, so sealed." The light pulsed once, then faded. Sarah stumbled back, clutching her hand. The cut was already beginning to glow with the same green light, marking her. One by one he called the others. Rebecca, Claire, Hannah, then Aria Miller. She forced her feet to move, forced herself to approach the altar even though every instinct screamed to run. But where would she go? Into the forest? To be hunted down? Back to the village where her mother would die? There was no escape. There had never been an escape. She placed her hand on the cold stone. Marcus raised the knife, and the forest exploded. It started with sound, a howl that raised every hair on Aria's body, a sound that was wrong, too large, too powerful to come from any natural throat. Then came the wind, violent and sudden, extinguishing every torch, plunging the clearing into darkness. "Get the girls in the wagon!" Marcus shouted. "Now!" But his men were already screaming. Shapes moved in the darkness. Massive shapes, low to the ground, circling the clearing with predatory grace. Eyes reflected what little moonlight penetrated the tree cover. Dozens of eyes, all fixed on the humans at the altar. Wolves. But no wolves Aria had ever heard of grew that large. "Run!" One of the drivers bolted for the wagon. He made it 3 steps before something crashed into him from the side, taking him down in a tangle of fur and teeth. His scream cut off abruptly. The girls scattered, but there was nowhere to go. The wolves had surrounded them completely, cutting off every avenue of escape. Marcus stood his ground at the altar, the ceremonial knife still in his hand. "This is territory-neutral ground," he shouted into the darkness. "By ancient law, you cannot interfere with legitimate commerce." "Legitimate?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, deep as thunder, resonant with barely contained rage. "You call slavery legitimate? You call blood magic commerce?" The speaker emerged from the tree line, and Aria's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. He was tall, taller than any man had a right to be, perhaps 7 feet. His body was human in shape but covered in thick dark fur. His face was simultaneously man and wolf, with a pronounced muzzle, sharp teeth, and eyes that glowed golden in the darkness. He wore simple leather clothing that looked primitive compared to Marcus's fine coat, but he carried himself with absolute authority. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire. "Kyle!" Marcus spat the name like a curse. "The Wolf King himself. How fortunate." "Fortunate?" The creature, Kale, laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "You perform blood-binding rituals in my forest, steal women from their homes, and think yourself fortunate that I found you." He moved closer, and Aria realized his pack had closed in as well. At least 20 wolves, all unnaturally large, all watching their king with fierce devotion. "These women came willingly," Marcus argued, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Contracts were signed, payment was made, everything was legal. Legal." Kale stopped directly in front of Marcus. The difference in their sizes was striking. Marcus tall for a human, but dwarfed by the Wolf King. Human laws, human contracts, neither of which mean anything in these woods. "The Commerce Guild will what? Send more slavers into my territory? I welcome them to try." Kale's eyes swept across the 5 girls, still frozen in terror near the altar. When his gaze fell on Aria, it lingered. His expression shifted, confusion, then recognition, then something else she couldn't identify. "You," he said, pointing at her with a clawed finger. "Come here." Aria's legs wouldn't move. She was going to die. They were all going to die, torn apart by monsters in this cursed forest, and no one would ever know what happened to them. "I said come here." Kale's voice was softer now, but no less commanding. I won't harm you. She didn't believe him, but she also didn't believe Marcus. And between a monster who promised not to hurt her and a man who'd lied from the beginning, she found herself choosing the monster. Aria walked forward on trembling legs until she stood before the Wolf King. This close, she could see the intelligence in those golden eyes, the very human anger and disgust as he looked at Marcus's ceremonial knife, at the blood still wet on the altar. "What's your name?" Kyle asked. "Aria." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Aria Miller." Aria. He said it like he was tasting the word. Then, gently, he took her hand, the one she'd placed on the altar. His claws were long and sharp, but his touch was careful. "Did you agree to this willingly? To being marked as property?" Tears burned her eyes. "My mother is dying. He promised to save her if I came with him." "Coercion, then. Not consent." Cale's expression hardened as he turned back to Marcus. "You've violated 3 of our oldest laws: enslavement, blood magic without consent, and trespass in sacred territory. Any one of these would warrant death." "Kill me and the guild will hunt you," Marcus shot back. "They'll burn these forests to ash. Every village will know monsters dwell here. Your precious pack will—" "My pack," Cale interrupted, "has survived far worse than human merchants and their guilds, but I'm not going to give them a martyr. You'll leave these woods alive, Marcus Thornwell, but you'll leave them empty-handed." He raised his voice, addressing all 5 girls. "You have a choice. Return to your village with this slaver, remain bound by his blood magic and owned by his household, or come with me, where you'll be free under my protection. No contracts, no bindings, just safety." "Don't listen to him," Marcus warned. "He's a beast. You've heard the stories. The Wolf King devours those who enter his territory." "The only devouring I see," Cale said coldly, "is what you plan to do to their lives." Hannah was the first to move. She walked slowly toward Kyle, then past him to join the circle of wolves. One by one, the others followed. Rebecca, Claire, Sarah. Aria was last. She looked at Marcus, at his cold eyes and false promises, at the knife still in his hand and the blood on the altar. She looked at the mark on her palm, already beginning to glow with that sickly green light. Then she looked at Cale, at his fierce golden eyes and barely restrained rage at what he'd witnessed. Monsters came in many forms, and not all of them had fangs. She walked past Marcus to join the other girls. "You'll regret this," Marcus hissed. "All of you. When the guild learns what happened here." "Tell them," Cale interrupted. "Tell them exactly what happened. Tell them the Wolf King has claimed these women under his protection. Tell them that anyone who enters these woods to take what doesn't belong to them will not leave alive. And tell them—" He moved with sudden speed, closing the distance to Marcus in a heartbeat. His hand closed around the merchant's throat, lifting him off his feet. "That if you ever return to this forest, your death will be neither quick nor merciful." He released Marcus, who collapsed, gasping to the ground. "Run," Kyle commanded. "Take your surviving men and run. Be grateful I'm feeling merciful tonight." Marcus and his remaining men didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled for the wagon, whipped the horses into a panicked gallop, and disappeared into the darkness. Silence fell over the clearing. Aria found she was shaking, from cold, from fear, from shock at everything that had just happened. Around her, the other girls wore similar expressions of disbelief. "What now?" Hannah finally asked, her voice small. "What happens to us now?" Cale turned to face them, and in the moonlight, Aria could see his features more clearly. Despite the fur, despite the wolf-like aspects of his face, his expressions were startlingly human, and right now, he looked exhausted. "Now," he said quietly, "you come home with me. My pack will protect you. My healers will tend to any injuries. And tomorrow, when the sun rises, we'll figure out what comes next." His eyes found Aria again, including how to break the blood binding he started before I interrupted. She looked down at her palm, where the mark glowed faintly. "Is it permanent?" "No, but breaking it will require—" He hesitated. "It will require time and trust." "Why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why did you save us? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." Kyle was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, His voice carried weight. Because someone should have saved me once, and no one did. So I swore that anyone who came to these woods seeking refuge would find it, that no one under my protection would ever feel powerless again. He turned, gesturing for them to follow. Come, dawn approaches, and you all need rest. The wolves formed a protective circle around the girls as they began to walk deeper into the forest, away from the altar, away from the road, away from everything they'd known. Aria glanced back once at the clearing, at the altar where her life had almost been stolen permanently, at the place where, impossibly, she'd been saved by a monster who called himself king. Then she turned forward, toward whatever awaited in the darkness ahead, and whispered the words that would change everything. With you, never again. The Wolf King's head turned slightly, as if he'd heard her despite the distance between them. For just a moment his golden eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there. Recognition, understanding, promise. Then they disappeared into the forest, 5 human girls and a pack of supernatural wolves, leaving the human world behind. Above them, the moon watched in silence, bearing witness to a bond that had just begun to form, a bond that would change the fate of both human and wolf forever. The journey through the forest lasted until dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Aria's feet ached, her dress was torn from branches, and exhaustion weighed on her like stones, but fear kept her moving. The wolves maintained their protective circle, silent as shadows, while Kale led them deeper into territory no human had seen in generations. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, the forest changed. The trees grew larger, older, their trunks wide as houses. Moss covered everything in carpet of emerald green, and the air itself felt different, charged with energy that made Aria's skin tingle. "We're close," Kale announced, his voice startling after hours of silence. Minutes later, they emerged into a valley that stole Aria's breath. A fortress rose from the valley floor, but calling it a fortress felt inadequate. It was part castle, part natural formation, as if someone had convinced the mountain itself to reshape into walls and towers. Stone and living wood intertwined in impossible architecture. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliff faces, creating a constant symphony of rushing water. And everywhere, were wolves. They lounged on stone outcroppings, patrolled the walls, played in the meadows surrounding the fortress. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all massive, all clearly supernatural, and all turning to watch as their king returned with unexpected guests. "Welcome," Kyle said, a hint of pride in his voice, "to Loonhaven, heart of the wolf territory and seat of my clan." Sarah stumbled, catching herself on a nearby tree. This is real. All of it. The stories were true. Some of them." Kyle began walking again, leading them across a stone bridge that arched over a crystal-clear stream. "Though I suspect the stories you heard painted me as a villain. Humans usually do. Can you blame them?" Claire spoke for the first time since leaving the clearing, her voice sharp with lingering fear. "You're not exactly normal." Kale's laugh was bitter. "Normal? No, I suppose I'm not. But then, normal men were preparing to enslave you, so perhaps abnormal has its advantages." They couldn't argue with that. The fortress gates stood open, massive wooden doors reinforced with iron and carved with symbols similar to those on Marcus's knife, but somehow different. Protective rather than binding, Aria thought, though she couldn't explain how she knew. Inside, the fortress was even more impressive. The main hall soared 3 stories high, with balconies and walkways connecting different levels. Tapestries hung from the walls depicting wolves running beneath moons of different colors. White, silver, blue, crimson. Fires burned in enormous hearths, filling the space with warmth. And there were people. Not many, but more than Aria expected. Men and women who looked human at first glance, but whose eyes reflected light like an animal's. Who moved with predatory grace. Who watched the newcomers with mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Half-bloods," Hannah whispered. "They're like him. Part wolf, part human." Kale heard her. His ears twitched in a distinctly canine gesture, but didn't comment. Instead, he gestured to a woman approaching from a side corridor. She was perhaps 50 years old, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Marina," Kyle said. "We have guests. They'll need rooms, food, clean clothes, and medical attention." Marina looked over the 5 bedraggled girls and nodded. "The poor dears look half dead. Come with me, little ones. Let's get you sorted." She spoke with a warm accent Aria couldn't place, and her presence was immediately comforting. The kind of person who could walk into chaos and somehow make everything seem manageable. "Wait," Aria said before following. She turned to Kyle. "The blood binding. You said you could break it. When?" Kyle's expression darkened. "Tonight, when the moon rises. The binding is weakest then. I interrupted it before it fully set, but breaking it will be difficult for both of us." "Why both of us?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because to break a blood binding, I'll need to replace it with something stronger. A protection mark. It will link you to me, to my pack. You'll be under my authority instead of Thornwell's, but you'll retain your free will. Your choices remain your own." "That sounds like just another form of ownership," Rebecca said, crossing her arms. "It does," Kyle admitted. "And I won't force it on anyone. But without breaking the binding, Thornwell can track you, compel you to return to him, use you however he sees fit. The binding grows stronger with each passing day until it becomes unbreakable. You have perhaps 3 days before it sets permanently." The girls exchanged uneasy glances. "What does this protection mark do exactly?" Aria asked. "What would we be agreeing to?" "You would be marked as members of my pack. Under wolf law, that makes you untouchable by outsiders. No one can harm you, claim you, or take you without facing me and every wolf loyal to me. In exchange," he paused, "in exchange, you would be bound to Loonhaven, unable to leave the territory without my permission." "So we trade one cage for another," Sarah said quietly. "Perhaps." Kyle didn't insult them by denying it. "But this cage has open doors. You would have freedom within my lands, thousands of acres. You could learn trades, develop skills, live lives of your choosing. And after 1 year, if you still wish to leave, I'll release you from the mark and help you relocate somewhere safe." "Why 1 year?" Hannah asked. "Because that's how long it takes to teach someone to survive in a world that wants to devour them." His golden eyes were serious. "You've seen what humans like Thornwell do. You think he's unique? There are hundreds like him throughout the 5 cities, thousands throughout the kingdom. And you 5, he gestured at them, are exactly what they hunt." Aria's hand went unconsciously to her marked palm. "What do you mean? What are we?" But Kale shook his head. "Food first. Rest. Then we'll talk. You need strength for what comes tonight." Before anyone could protest, Marina ushered them away, chattering about hot baths and proper meals. Aria looked back once to see Kyle standing alone in the great hall, surrounded by his wolves, looking more isolated than any king should be. The room they gave Aria was small but comfortable. A real bed with clean linens, a window overlooking the valley, a chest for belongings she didn't have. Luxury compared to her cottage in Millbrook. A servant brought hot water for bathing, followed by clean clothes. Simple but well made, in soft fabrics that didn't scratch. Aria washed away the grime of travel, the terror of the previous night, trying to feel clean even though she knew some stains went deeper than skin. The marked palm throbbed. The green glow had faded with sunrise, but she could still feel it there, a cold presence just beneath her skin, waiting. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "It's open," she called, expecting Marina. Instead, Kale entered, ducking his head to fit through the doorframe. In the morning light streaming through the window, Aria could see him more clearly than before. His fur was dark gray, almost black, and thick enough that she could imagine it being warm to touch. His claws were retracted. She hadn't realized he could do that, making his hands look almost human. Almost. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, remaining near the door. "But we need to talk before tonight, about what you are." Aria sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly very aware that she was alone with a creature that could tear her apart without effort. But he made no move toward her, and something in his posture suggested he was giving her space deliberately. "You said we're what they hunt," she prompted. "What does that mean?" Kale moved to the window, looking out over his territory. Tell me what you know about the old world, before humans drove the supernatural into hiding. Just stories, myths, creatures that could shift between forms, wolves, bears, ravens, magic that flowed like water, wars that reshaped the land. Not myths, history. His voice carried the weight of ages. Once, humans and shifters lived side by side, sometimes in harmony, more often in conflict, but we existed openly. Then came the Purge, a century of hunting, burning, destroying anything that didn't fit humanity's narrow definition of acceptable. My people retreated to the wild places. Others went into hiding among humans. Some bloodlines were lost entirely. And you think we're, what, part shifter? Not exactly. Kyle turned from the window. Tell me about your mother, about her illness. The change of subject caught Aria off guard. What does my mother have to do with, please, trust me? She took a breath. Mama got sick about 2 years ago. Started with fatigue, then the wasting began. No medicine helped. The doctors couldn't explain it. Said her body was fighting itself, attacking healthy parts for no reason. And before she got sick, did she ever mention strange experiences? Vivid dreams? Moments of unusual strength or speed? Aria frowned, reaching back through memories. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8, she lifted our cart when the wheel broke. The whole cart, heavy with supplies. Papa was shocked, kept asking how she did it. She said she didn't know, that fear must have given her strength. And she always knew things. When storms were coming, when someone was lying, when danger was near. Papa called it women's intuition. It wasn't intuition. Kale's voice was gentle but firm. Your mother is moon-marked, a human born with dormant shifter blood, not enough to change forms, but enough to carry certain gifts, enhanced senses, occasional bursts of strength, an affinity for reading people and situations. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. If she had supernatural blood, she would have told me. She would have... Would she? Kale interrupted. In a world that burns witches and hunts anything different? She probably didn't even know herself. Many moon-marked never realize what they are. The gifts are subtle enough to dismiss as coincidence or luck. Until what? Until they're suppressed for too long. Moon-marked need to acknowledge their nature, use their gifts occasionally, or the energy turns inward, becomes poison instead of power. That's what's happening to your mother. Her own magic is consuming her because she's spent her whole life denying it exists. Aria stood abruptly, pacing the small room. You're saying Mama is dying because she didn't know she was part supernatural? That if someone had just told her, taught her, she'd be fine? Yes. And you're moon-marked, too. Stronger than your mother, I suspect. I could sense it the moment I saw you at the altar. She stopped pacing, fear blooming in her chest. Am I going to get sick too? Not if you learn to acknowledge what you are, to use your gifts instead of suppressing them. Kyle moved closer, and Aria noticed he was being careful to approach slowly, non-threateningly. That's why Thornwell wanted you specifically. He's been hunting moon-marked women for years. For what purpose? Kale's expression turned grim. Blood magic. Moon-marked blood is potent, especially from someone young and untrained. It can be harvested, processed, used to create serums that grant temporary supernatural abilities. Strength, speed, extended life. There's an entire black market for it in the 5 cities. The room tilted again. Aria sat back down on the bed before her legs could give out. He was going to drain our blood? Use us like livestock? Worse, the binding ritual wasn't just about ownership. It was the first step in a gradual process, making you compliant, dependent. By the time you realized what was happening, you'd be too weak to resist. Kyle knelt in front of her, bringing his eyes level with hers. That's what I saved you from. All 5 of you are moon-marked. That's why he chose you specifically from your village. Hannah, Sarah, Rebecca, Claire, they all have the blood too? Yes. And like you, most probably don't know it. It manifests differently in everyone. Enhanced healing, perfect memory, natural affinity with animals, precognitive dreams. The gifts vary, but the blood is the same. Aria thought of Hannah's unnaturally quick recovery from childhood illnesses. Sarah's ability to calm even the most vicious dogs. Rebecca's photographic memory that let her recall conversations word for word. Claire's dreams that sometimes came true. Details that seemed insignificant individually, but together painted a clear picture. "What happens to us now?" she asked quietly. "If we stay here, learn to use these gifts. What then? Do we become like you? Part wolf? No. Moon-marked cannot shift forms. You'll remain human in appearance. But you'll be stronger, faster, more resilient than ordinary humans. Your senses will sharpen. You'll live longer, perhaps a century instead of 70 or 80 years. And you'll be part of something larger than yourself. A pack. A family. And if we don't want that? If we just want normal lives?" Kyle's smile was sad. "There's no going back to normal, Aria. Thornwell knows what you are now. Even if we break his binding, he'll hunt you. Others like him will too. The black market for moon-marked blood is too profitable to ignore. Your only real choices are to stay here under my protection and learn to defend yourself, or run for the rest of your life hoping they never catch up." It wasn't really a choice at all. "Tonight," Aria said, "when you break the binding, what will it feel like?" "I don't know," Kyle admitted. "I've never done it before. Protection marks are usually given willingly, carefully, over the course of days. Breaking an active binding and replacing it simultaneously, I'll be attempting something unprecedented. Could it kill me? Yes." He didn't lie to her, and she appreciated that. The shock could stop your heart, or the binding could resist breaking and tear your mind apart, or the energies could simply be incompatible and destroy us both. "You'd risk your life for me? For all of us?" "I would. I am." He stood, offering her his hand. Clawed, but somehow not threatening. "Because someone has to stand between the wolves and the lambs. And I chose long ago which I wanted to be." Aria looked at his hand, at the creature offering her salvation at the cost of everything she'd known. At the king who could have simply let them be taken, stayed hidden in his forest, avoided the trouble they represented. She took his hand. His palm was warm, his grip careful despite the obvious strength there. "I'll do it," she said. "Tonight, I'll accept your protection mark. I'll learn what I am, and I'll survive, because going back isn't an option anymore." "No," Kyle agreed softly. "It isn't." He released her hand but didn't step away. "Get some rest. Eat. The others are making their decisions as well. Tonight, when the moon rises, we'll gather at the Heartstone, the sacred center of Loonhaven. Those who wish to be marked will step forward. Those who don't, I'll help them find another way." "Is there really another way?" "There's always another way. It just might not be a better one." He turned to leave, but Arya's voice stopped him. "Kale, why did you look surprised when you saw me?" "At the clearing. Your expression changed." He stood frozen in the doorway for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, remembering. "Because I've seen you before, in dreams. For months now, I've been dreaming of a girl with dark hair and determined eyes, standing at a crossroads between two worlds. I never understood what the dreams meant. Until last night." "What do they mean?" He looked back at her, his golden eyes unreadable. "That our fates are tangled together, yours and mine. For good or ill, we're connected now." Then he was gone, leaving Aria alone with her thoughts and the marked palm that wouldn't stop throbbing. The afternoon passed in a haze. Marina brought food, real food, more than Aria had seen in months. Fresh bread, roasted meat, vegetables seasoned with herbs, fruit so ripe it burst with flavor. She ate until her stomach ached, realizing she'd been half-starved for years without quite acknowledging it. The other girls gathered in a common room after eating. They looked better, clean, fed, dressed in fresh clothes, but fear still haunted their eyes. "He told you?" Hannah asked as soon as Aria entered. "About what we are?" "Moon-marked. Yes. It's insane," Claire said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Supernatural blood, magic, all of it. It has to be some kind of trick." Rebecca shook her head. "It explains too much to be a trick. Every strange thing that ever happened to me, every time I knew something I shouldn't have known, it all makes sense now. But accepting his mark," Sarah interjected, "binding ourselves to him, how is that different from what Thornwell wanted?" "Intent," Aria said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Thornwell wanted to use us, drain us, destroy us for profit. Kyle wants to protect us, teach us, help us survive. The binding might look similar, but the purpose is completely different. Or that's what he wants us to believe, Claire countered. We don't know him. We don't know if we can trust him. Can we trust anyone else? Hannah's voice was small. Our villages sold us. Our families took the gold. The only person who stood between us and slavery was a monster who calls himself king. Maybe he's using us. Maybe this is all manipulation, but at least he gave us a choice. Silence fell over the room. I'm doing it, Aria announced. Tonight I'm accepting the protection mark. I'm learning what I am and how to defend myself, because I'm not running for the rest of my life, and I'm not going back to being helpless. I'm in too, Rebecca said. My whole life, I felt different, wrong somehow. If this is why, if this is what I am, then I want to know. One by one, the others nodded. Even Claire, despite her reservations. Together then, Hannah said. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. They joined hands, 5 girls who'd been strangers yesterday, sisters in survival today. Night fell quickly in the valley. Aria watched from her window as the sky darkened from blue to indigo to black. Stars appeared like diamonds scattered across velvet. And then, rising over the eastern mountains, the moon. It was full, perfectly, impossibly full, huge and silver, and so bright it cast actual shadows. Aria's marked palm began to burn. A knock at her door. It's time, Marina called. The others are gathering. Aria took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door. Marina led her through corridors lit by torches and moonlight, down stone stairs worn smooth by centuries of paws and feet, out into the night air that smelled of pine and distant snow. The path led to the valley's center, where an enormous stone rose from the earth like a tooth, the Heart Stone. It was 20 feet tall at least, covered in carvings similar to those on the fortress gates. Wolves ran eternally across its surface, chasing prey, playing, howling at carved moons. At its base, a pool of water reflected the real moon overhead, making it seem like the stone stood between earth and sky. Kale waited there, along with at least 50 wolves and 24 of the half-blooded people. He'd changed clothes, now wearing ceremonial robes of deep gray decorated with silver thread. He looked more king than monster, more priest than predator. The other girls arrived moments after Aria. They formed a nervous cluster near the pool. Welcome, Kale's voice carried easily across the gathered crowd. We stand tonight at a crossroads. 5 lives hang in the balance, bound by blood magic they didn't consent to, marked for fates they didn't choose. We gather to break those bindings and forge new ones. Bonds of protection, bonds of pack. He gestured, and 5 wolves stepped forward, each one massive, each a different shade of gray or brown or black. They positioned themselves around the Heartstone, forming a circle. The binding ritual requires sacrifice, Kale continued, not of blood, but of isolation. To break what Thornwell began, you must accept connection. To all of you, he addressed the girls directly. This will hurt. The old binding will resist. Your body will fight, but you will not face it alone. What do we need to do? Aria asked. Step into the pool, one at a time. Place both hands on the Heartstone, and hold on. No matter what you feel, don't let go. Hannah went first. She waded into the pool, knee-deep, the water so clear it seemed like she was walking on light. She placed her palms flat against the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Hannah screamed. Green light erupted from her hands, the blood binding fighting to maintain its hold. Her body convulsed, and Aria started forward to help, but Kale's hand on her shoulder stopped her. Watch, he commanded. Kale raised his own hands, and golden light streamed from his palms, flowing into the Heartstone. The green light and gold light met, clashed, intertwined. The wolves around the stone began to howl, a haunting harmony that seemed to vibrate in Aria's bones. Hannah's screams became sobs. The green light flared brighter, trying to consume the gold, but Kyle didn't waver. More light poured from him, relentless as a tide, and gradually, so gradually, the green began to fade. Then it shattered. The sound was like breaking glass, and Hannah collapsed into the pool. Two wolves immediately jumped in, supporting her, carrying her to shore. On her palm, where the green glow had been, a new mark appeared. Silver, shaped like a stylized wolf paw. The protection mark. "One down," Kyle said, though Aria noticed he was breathing harder. "Who's next?" Sarah volunteered. Then Rebecca. Then Claire. Each time, the process was agony. Each time, the girls screamed and sobbed and nearly broke. Each time, Kyle poured more of himself into breaking the bindings. And each time, Aria could see it costing him. His hands trembled. Sweat beaded on his fur. The golden light grew dimmer. By the time Claire collapsed into the pool, newly marked and barely conscious, Kale could barely stand. "That's enough," Marina said firmly, stepping forward. "You're killing yourself. Let the last one wait until tomorrow." No. Aria stepped into the pool before anyone could stop her. The water was warm, almost hot, charged with residual magic. "I'm the reason we're here. I'm the one he selected first. If this is going to break him, better it break me too." She placed her hands on the heartstone. The world exploded. Not into pain, though there was pain, searing and absolute. No, the world exploded into awareness. Suddenly, Aria could feel everything. The stone beneath her hands, ancient and patient and alive in ways she didn't understand. The water around her legs, each droplet distinct and purposeful. The moon overhead, pulling at something deep in her chest. And Kale. She could feel Kale. His exhaustion, his determination, his fear that he wouldn't have enough strength left to break this last binding, his regret that he'd ever started this, that he'd put himself in a position to fail someone who needed him. She could feel his heart beating, could feel his power, vast and terrible and beautiful, flowing through him like rivers of light. And she could feel the binding. It wrapped around her like chains, cold and hungry, trying to pull her back toward Marcus Thornwell, trying to reduce her to property, to possession, to a thing without will or choice. Rage filled her, pure incandescent rage. "No," she heard herself say. "You don't own me. You never will." The green light flared, but this time, something else happened. Aria's own light joined the battle. Not gold like Kale's. Silver, like the moon overhead. It poured from her hands, from her chest, from every part of her, and smashed into the binding like a battering ram. The binding recoiled, surprised. Then it fought back harder, trying to burrow deeper, trying to reach her heart where it could set permanent roots. Aria felt Kale's shock through their connection, felt him realize what she was doing, felt him pour the last of his strength into helping her, their lights intertwining, gold and silver braiding together into something stronger than either alone. Together, they shattered the binding. The explosion knocked Aria off her feet. She fell backward into the pool, water closing over her head. And for a moment, she was drowning, suffocating, dying. Strong hands pulled her up, Kyle's hands. He'd jumped into the pool, caught her, was holding her against his chest while she gasped for air. "Breathe," he commanded. "Just breathe. It's over. You're safe." Aria's vision cleared slowly. She was in his arms, cradled against fur that was indeed warm and soft. His heart thundered beneath her ear, faster than it should be. "Did it work?" she managed to ask. He turned her hand over gently. There, on her palm, the protection mark glowed silver, but it was different from the others. Their marks were simple paw prints. Hers was more complex. A wolf and a crescent moon intertwined, the design intricate and beautiful. "It worked," Kyle said, his voice filled with wonder. "Better than I could have imagined. Your mark is... I've never seen anything like it. What does it mean?" He met her eyes, and in his golden gaze, she saw something that made her breath catch. Recognition, understanding, maybe even fear. "It means you're not just moon-marked. You're something more. Something that hasn't existed in centuries." He carried her from the pool, setting her gently on the stone shore. "It means our connection runs deeper than I thought possible. And it means..." He staggered suddenly, and Marina rushed forward to support him. "Enough revelations for one night," the older woman declared. "You've nearly killed yourself, and these poor girls are half dead. Everyone to bed. Explanations can wait for morning." The wolves dispersed, and the half-blooded people helped carry the 5 marked girls back to the fortress. Aria's last glimpse of Kyle showed him leaning heavily against the hearthstone, staring at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. Aria woke to sunlight and the smell of breakfast. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory crashed back, the binding, the breaking, the silver light pouring from her hands. She looked at her palm. The mark was still there, no longer glowing but clearly visible, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A knock at the door. "May I enter?" Kyle's voice. Yes. He looked better than last night, rested, though still tired around the eyes. He carried a tray with food and tea. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting it on the small table. "And we need to talk. About the mark. About what I am." "Yes." He pulled up a chair, sitting backward in it with his arms folded over the back. Very human gesture, despite his appearance. "The light you manifested last night, silver light, is incredibly rare. It suggests your moon-marked blood is stronger than I realized. Strong enough that you might eventually develop abilities beyond what typical moon-marked possess." "Like what?" "Partial transformation. Not full shifting. You'll never become a wolf, but you might develop claws, enhanced senses, limited ability to communicate with animals. Things that blur the line between human and shifter." Aria absorbed this. "And the mark? Why is it different from the others?" Kyle hesitated. "Because our connection is different. When we broke the binding together, we formed a bond. Not just pack bond, but something deeper. I can feel you, Aria. Your emotions, your physical state. When you're hurt, I'll know. When you're afraid, I'll feel it. And I can feel you too? Eventually? Yes. As the bond strengthens." She thought about the implications. "That's incredibly invasive." "It is," he admitted. "And I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. The bond formed because we were both channeling power simultaneously, both fighting the same enemy. Our energies synchronized." "Can it be broken?" Pain flashed across his face. "Yes, but it would be difficult, painful for both of us, and it would leave you more vulnerable to future magical attacks." Aria stood, pacing the room. "So I'm marked as your pack member, bonded to you on some metaphysical level, and developing supernatural abilities I don't understand. And all of this happened in less than 24 hours. Yes, this is insane. Yes." She stopped pacing, turning to face him. "But it beats being Thornwell's property." A small smile touched Kale's wolf features. "I'd like to think so. So what happens now? You said you'd teach us to survive, to use our gifts. How does that work?" "Training. Every day. You'll learn to fight, to sense danger, to access your enhanced abilities. Marina will teach you pack law and wolf culture. I'll teach you about the supernatural world, what exists, who to avoid, how to navigate a society most humans don't even know exists. And after a year, you really will let me go if I want to leave?" "I gave my word." Kale stood, moving to the window. "Though I hope you'll choose to stay. The pack needs people like you, moonmarked who understand both worlds. Who can bridge the gap between human and wolf? Is that what this is really about? Building bridges?" "Partially." He turned back to her. "But mostly it's about survival. There's a war coming, Aria, between humans who want to control the supernatural and supernatural creatures who want to be free. People like Thornwell are just the beginning. And when that war arrives, we'll need everyone we can get who's willing to fight for something better than slavery and exploitation." The weight of his words settled over her like a blanket. A war, not just personal survival, but something much larger. "You're asking a lot of someone you just met," Aria said quietly. "I know. And I don't expect an answer today, or this month, or even this year. I'm just telling you the truth. What you do with it is your choice." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The others are gathering in the training yard this afternoon. If you feel well enough, join us. If not, rest. You've earned it." After he left, Aria sat by the window, looking out over Loonhaven. The valley was beautiful in daylight, green and vibrant, full of life. Below, she could see wolves playing, people working, smoke rising from forges and kitchens. A home, a community, a life completely different from anything she'd known. She looked down at the mark on her palm. at the wolf and moon intertwined. "With you, never again," she whispered, remembering the words she'd spoken in the clearing. And somewhere in the fortress she felt it, a pulse of acknowledgement, of agreement, of promise. Kyle had heard her. Through the bond, across the distance, he'd heard. Aria smiled, despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty and massive changes happening too fast to process. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone, and that, she realized, might be worth every risk she'd taken. 3 weeks of training transformed Aria. Her reflexes sharpened, her senses expanded, and the silver light came easier each day. The other girls thrived too. Hannah could heal minor wounds. Sarah spoke to animals. Rebecca's memory became photographic, and Claire's dreams predicted danger. Then Marcus returned. He arrived at dawn with 50 hired hunters and a woman in chains. She was moon-marked like them, but corrupted. Her eyes glowed sickly green, and she moved like a puppet on strings. "My blood slave," Marcus called from beyond the fortress walls. "Harvested for 5 years. She'll tear down your gates, Wolf King. Return what you stole, or watch your home burn." Kale refused. The battle began immediately. The corrupted woman shattered the gates with unnatural strength. Hunters poured through, armed with silver weapons and blood magic. Wolves fell, their howls of pain cutting through the chaos. Aria fought alongside her sisters, but Marcus was hunting them specifically. His men herded them toward the valley's edge, away from Kale's protection. "Your blood is worth more than gold," Marcus snarled, cornering them against a cliff. "I'll drain every drop." Rage exploded through Aria. Her mark blazed silver, and she felt Kale's power surge through their bond. The transformation came instinctively. Her hands sprouted claws. Her senses sharpened to supernatural levels, and silver light wrapped around her like armor. The other girls transformed too, their combined moon-marked power creating a barrier of pure energy. Through their bond, Aria felt Kale's shock and pride. Together, they fought, her silver light and his golden strength creating something unprecedented. The bond became visible, a shimmering thread connecting them across the battlefield. Marcus's forces broke. The corrupted woman collapsed, freed from his control. His hunters fled into the forest. But Marcus escaped into the mountains, swearing vengeance. As dawn broke over the carnage, Aria stood beside Kale, both bloodied but alive. "He'll return," she said. "Let him," Kale replied. "Next time, we'll be ready." The bond between them pulsed with shared determination. The war had begun. The fortress took 3 days to repair. Broken gates were rebuilt stronger, walls reinforced with both stone and protective magic, and the wounded, wolf and human alike, were tended in the great hall that had been converted into a makeshift infirmary. Aria barely slept during those 3 days. She worked alongside the pack, learning quickly that being moon-marked meant needing less rest than ordinary humans. Her hands blistered from hauling timber, then healed overnight. Her muscles ached from lifting stones, then grew stronger. And through it all, she felt Kale, his exhaustion as he coordinated defenses, his grief for the 6 wolves who had died in the attack, his burning determination that it would never happen again. The bond between them had become impossible to ignore. On the 4th morning, Aria woke to find Marina sitting beside her bed, a serious expression on her weathered face. "The Wolf King requests your presence," Marina said quietly. "All 5 of you, in his private chambers." Aria's stomach tightened. Kale had been distant since the battle, coordinating with his scouts and strategists, planning for Marcus's inevitable return. She'd felt his presence through the bond, but hadn't spoken to him directly. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Marina's smile was sad. "Everything is wrong, child. But perhaps today, we begin to make it right." Kale's chambers occupied the highest tower of Loonhaven, accessible only by a winding staircase that made Aria's legs burn by the time she reached the top. The other girls arrived simultaneously, all wearing similar expressions of concern. The chamber itself was surprisingly modest. A large desk covered in maps and reports, shelves filled with ancient books, weapons mounted on the walls, and a balcony overlooking the entire valley. Kyle stood at that balcony, his back to them, staring out at his territory. Close the door, he said without turning. Hannah did, and the 5 girls stood in an uncertain cluster, waiting. I brought you here under the promise of safety, Kyle began, still facing away. I told you that no one would harm you again. I gave you my word. You kept it, Aria said. We're alive. Marcus's forces were driven back, at the cost of 6 of my pack. Now he turned, and the pain in his golden eyes was stark. 6 wolves who died defending strangers. Defending you. The words hit like a physical blow. They didn't die for nothing, Rebecca said quietly. They died fighting slavery, fighting monsters who would have hurt countless others. Noble words. But their families still grieve. Cale moved to his desk, unrolling a map of the 5 cities and surrounding territories. Marcus Thornwell has gone to ground, but my scouts have been tracking his movements. He's not hiding. He's recruiting. He placed markers on the map, red stones that clustered around the cities. Former soldiers, mercenaries, rogue mages, even other supernatural hunters. He's building an army, and he has one goal: to capture the 5 of you and destroy me. The attack on Loonhaven was just the opening move. Sarah's voice shook slightly. How many? At least 200 fighters. Maybe more. All equipped with silver weapons, blood magic talismans, and detailed intelligence about our defenses. Cale's clawed finger traced lines on the map. He's also been spreading propaganda, telling the villages that I kidnapped 5 innocent girls. That I'm a monster holding you prisoner, turning public opinion against us. That's a lie, Claire protested. Truth doesn't matter if people believe the lie, and they will believe it, because it fits their existing narrative about creatures like me. Kyle's expression was grim. Within a month, maybe 2, Marcus will march on Loonhaven with overwhelming force, and this time, we might not survive. Silence fell over the room like a shroud. So what do we do? Aria asked. Run? Hide? There has to be— We fight back, Cale interrupted. But not here. Not on the defensive. We take the battle to him. He pointed to a location on the map, a compound outside the largest of the 5 cities. This is Marcus's estate, his base of operations for the blood trade. Intelligence suggests he's keeping at least 20 moon-marked prisoners there, harvesting them for the black market. If we strike there, we accomplish 3 things: free the prisoners, cripple his operation, and expose his crimes to the public. Hannah stepped closer to the map. You want us to attack a fortified estate? We've had 3 weeks of training. We're not soldiers. No, you're not. But you're moon-marked, and that makes you more dangerous than any ordinary soldier. Kyle looked at each of them in turn. I've seen what you can do. Aria's silver light and claws. Hannah's healing that saved 4 wolves who should have died. Sarah's ability to turn Marcus's own hunting dogs against him. Rebecca's perfect memory that let her predict enemy movements. Claire's warning dream that saved us from an ambush. Together, you're formidable. But we're also the ones Marcus wants most, Aria said, understanding dawning. If we go to him, we're giving him exactly what he wants. Yes, which is why it might be the last thing he expects. Oh, Cale smiled, but it was a predator's smile. He thinks you're hiding behind me, weak and afraid. He thinks you're victims who need constant protection. We'll show him how wrong he is. Rebecca crossed her arms. This is insane. Even if we succeed, even if we free the prisoners and expose Marcus, the Commerce Guild won't just let this go. They'll come after us with everything they have. They will, Cale agreed, which is why we need to make this bigger than just us. We need to show the world what's really happening, make it impossible to ignore or cover up. He pulled out another document, a list of names. Journalists, reformers, politicians who've been trying to expose the blood trade for years. People who have evidence but lack the proof to make it stick. We give them that proof. We document everything we find at Marcus's estate. We rescue the prisoners and bring them forward as witnesses. We make this so public, so undeniable, that the Guild has no choice but to disavow Marcus and shut down the trade. Or they double down and try to destroy all the witnesses, Sarah said darkly. Possible, but less likely if we have powerful allies. Cale tapped one name on the list. Governor Adelaide Chen. She's been fighting corruption in the 5 cities for a decade. If we can get her the evidence she needs, she'll have the authority to act. Aria studied the map, her tactical mind. newly awakened by weeks of training, analyzing the plan. It could work, but we'd need perfect timing. Hit the estate, extract the prisoners, gather evidence, and get everything to the governor before Marcus can retaliate or disappear the evidence. Exactly. Which is why we strike in 6 days during the Harvest Festival. Half of Marcus's security will be in the city celebrating. The compound will be vulnerable. 6 days? Claire's voice pitched higher. That's barely enough time to plan a raid like this. It's enough. Cale's voice carried absolute conviction. I'll lead a team of my best fighters. You 5 will come with us. Not to fight unless absolutely necessary, but because the prisoners will trust moon-marked faces more than wolves. Marina will coordinate with our contacts in the city, and we'll have one more advantage. He gestured to the balcony. Come, I want to show you something. They followed him outside into the mountain air. Below, the valley sprawled green and peaceful, but Cale pointed south, toward a forest that looked darker than the rest. The Shadow Woods, ancient territory, older than my clan, inhabited by creatures that even I respect. I've made contact with their leader, a raven shifter named Morrigan. She's agreed to provide intelligence and aerial reconnaissance in exchange for a share of any magical artifacts we recover from Marcus's estate. You're forming an alliance, Aria said, understanding the implications. Not just for this raid, but for the larger fight. Yes. For too long, supernatural creatures have remained isolated, hiding in our separate territories while humans pick us off one by one. The blood trade exists because we let it, because we didn't stand together. Kyle's eyes swept across the valley. That changes now. We build a coalition, we fight back, and we make it clear that enslaving our kind will no longer be tolerated. The weight of what he was proposing settled over them. This wasn't just about their survival anymore. It was about starting a revolution. I need to know, Cale said, turning to face the 5 girls. Are you with me? All of you? Because once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be marked as enemies of the Commerce Guild. You'll never be able to return to normal human society. This path leads to war. Aria felt the eyes of her sisters on her. Somehow, she'd become their unofficial leader. What she decided would influence them all. She thought of her mother, still sick in Millbrook, thought of all the other girls who'd been sold over the years, swallowed by the cities and never heard from again, thought of the corrupted moon-marked woman Marcus had used as a weapon, her mind destroyed by years of harvesting. She thought of the choice that had never really been a choice, fight or die. I'm in, Aria said firmly. Not because I want war, but because the war already exists. Marcus and people like him declared it long ago. We're just finally fighting back. I'm in, Hannah echoed. Those prisoners deserve freedom as much as we did. In, Rebecca agreed. In, Sarah whispered. Claire was last. She stood silent for a long moment, then nodded. In, but if we die, I'm haunting all of you. Despite everything, they laughed. It was a small moment of lightness in the gathering darkness, but Aria treasured it. Kyle's expression softened. Thank you, all of you. I know what I'm asking. You're asking us to be brave, Aria interrupted. To fight for something bigger than ourselves. That's not a burden. That's a gift. Through their bond, she felt his gratitude, his respect, and something else. Something warmer that made her heart skip. 6 days, Kyle said, returning to business mode. We train hard. We plan carefully, and we strike fast. Marina will coordinate your training schedule. I'll work on logistics with my captains. We gather at dawn on the 7th day and ride for the 5 cities. The girls filed out, but Kyle's voice stopped Aria at the door. Stay, please. I need to speak with you privately. Her pulse quickened as the others left, leaving her alone with the Wolf King. Cale waited until the footsteps faded down the stairs before speaking. The bond between us, he began carefully. It's been growing stronger. You've felt it. Yes, Aria admitted. Sometimes I know what you're feeling before you say anything. Sometimes I hear your thoughts. And I yours. He moved closer, and Aria forced herself not to step back. It's unprecedented. Even among true mates, wolves who bond for life, the connection isn't usually this strong this quickly. What are you saying? I'm saying that when we go into battle, I'll be distracted. If you're hurt, I'll feel it. If you're in danger, I'll abandon strategy to reach you. That vulnerability could get us both killed. Aria's chest tightened. So what do we do? Can we suppress it somehow? We could try. There are techniques, meditation practices that might dampen the bond temporarily. Kale hesitated. Or we could do the opposite. What opposite? We could complete the bond. Fully merge our connection, making it strong enough that we can communicate clearly across distances, share strength in battle, support each other instead of it being a liability. How do we complete it? Kale's expression was carefully neutral. A ritual, similar to the protection marking, but more intimate. It would require trust, vulnerability, a willingness to let me see all of you, your fears, your pain, your deepest self, and you would see all of me in return. The implications hung heavy in the air. That's terrifying, Aria said honestly. Yes, but it would make us stronger in the fight? Significantly. A completed bond would let us coordinate perfectly in combat. You could draw on my strength if yours failed. I could sense danger to you before it struck. We'd essentially fight as one entity in two bodies. Aria walked to the balcony, needing air. The valley spread below, peaceful and beautiful. In 6 days, she'd leave this sanctuary to attack one of the most powerful men in the 5 cities. The odds of survival weren't good. If I die, she said quietly, and we're fully bonded, what happens to you? It would be painful, potentially fatal if the bond is strong enough. True mates often don't survive the loss of their partner. She turned to face him. So you're asking me to risk my life and tie it to yours so completely that we might die together? Yes. No hesitation, no sugarcoating, just truth. That's insane. Yes. When would we do this ritual? Tonight, if you agree. Before the final training begins. It takes several hours to complete and leaves both parties weakened temporarily. We'd need time to recover before the raid. Aria studied him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time since they'd met. Past the fur and claws and wolf features to the person underneath. She saw his loneliness, centuries of being feared and isolated. Saw his determination to protect those weaker than himself. Saw his absolute conviction that this fight was worth dying for. And she saw something else. Something that made her breath catch. He cared about her. Not just as a pack member or an ally, but as someone precious. Someone irreplaceable. You're not asking me to do this just for tactical advantage, Aria said softly. Are you? No, Kale admitted. I'm asking because the thought of you dying while I stand helpless is unbearable. I'm asking because in 3 weeks you've become essential to me in ways I can't fully explain. I'm asking because... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Because? Aria prompted. Because I think you might be my true mate. And if that's true, then completing the bond isn't just strategy. It's destiny. The word hung between them like a bell's toll. Aria should have been terrified. Should have run. This was too much. Too fast. Too intense. But instead, she felt a strange sense of rightness. As if pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed were finally clicking into place. I'm 22, she said. 3 weeks ago, I was a village girl caring for her dying mother. I've never been in love, never been with anyone, and now you're telling me we're destined mates? I'm telling you what I feel, what I sense through the bond. Kale's voice was gentle. But destiny is just potential. You still have a choice. We can suppress the bond, keep our distance, remain allies instead of something more. I won't force this on you. What do you want? I want you safe. I want you free. I want you to have every choice I can possibly give you. He paused. And I want you close enough that I never have to wonder if you're all right. But what I want doesn't matter if it's not what you want, too. Aria closed her eyes, searching her own feelings. Did she care about Kale? Yes. Did she trust him? Increasingly. Was she attracted to him despite his non-human appearance? She was surprised to realize the answer was yes. But love? Destiny? Those were huge concepts. And yet, through the bond she felt his heartbeat, felt his hope and fear warring in equal measure, felt his absolute certainty that she was important, precious, worth protecting at any cost. And she realized she felt the same about him. How does the ritual work? She asked, opening her eyes. Relief flooded through the bond so strongly she gasped. We go to the Heartstone at midnight, Kale explained. Just the two of us. We perform the bonding ceremony under the full moon. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and willingness to accept each other completely, flaws and all. And after? What changes? Everything and nothing. We'll still be ourselves, but connected on a level most people never experience. My pack will recognize you as my mate, which gives you authority second only to mine, and we'll be bound for life. There's no undoing a completed true mate bond. For life, the enormity of that commitment should have sent her running. Instead, Aria found herself nodding. Tonight, then, at midnight, we complete the bond. Are you certain? Once begun, the ritual can't be stopped. I'm certain. And strangely, she was. We're going into battle in 6 days. I'd rather face it bonded to someone I trust than alone. Kale crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He took her hands carefully, mindful of his claws. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me, for choosing this. Thank me after we survive the raid, Aria said. But she squeezed his hands gently. Through the bond, warmth flowed between them. Anticipation mixed with fear, mixed with something that felt remarkably like joy. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Aria trained with the other girls, learning new combat techniques and practicing their moon-marked abilities. She didn't tell them about the bonding ritual. That felt too private, too huge to share just yet. But Hannah noticed something. You're different today, she said during a water break. Calmer, more centered. Just focused on what's coming, Aria deflected. Uh-huh. Hannah's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled. Does this focus have anything to do with a certain wolf king who can't stop looking at you during training? Aria's cheeks heated. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Hannah laughed. Just be careful, okay? I know he saved us, but he's still a supernatural creature centuries old. That's a lot of baggage. I'll be careful, Aria promised. But as midnight approached and she made her way to the Heartstone, she wondered if careful was even possible anymore. They were past careful, past cautious. They were jumping off cliffs and hoping to fly. Kale waited at the stone, wearing simple robes the color of moonlight. He'd dismissed the guards, leaving the valley's heart completely private. You came? He said, as if he'd doubted. I said I would. People change their minds. Not me. Not about this. Aria stepped into the pool surrounding the Heartstone. The water was warm, welcoming. So, how do we begin? Kyle joined her in the pool. We speak truth, complete honesty, no matter how difficult. The bond forms from mutual understanding and acceptance. He took her hands and Aria felt the bond between them pulse with anticipation. I'll start, Kale said. My true name is Kale Silverclaw. I'm 347 years old. I became Wolf King after my predecessor was killed by hunters. I've led my pack for 2 centuries, and in all that time, I've never met anyone who made me feel what I feel with you. The vulnerability in his voice made Aria's throat tight. I'm Aria Miller, she replied. I'm 22. My father died in the mines. My mother is dying from suppressed moon-marked blood, and before you saved me, I thought my life would amount to nothing more than surviving until the next crisis. You showed me I could be more. What do you fear most? Kale asked. Failing the people who depend on me. Becoming what Marcus wanted to make me. A victim, a thing without power. Losing the freedom I just found. She paused. And losing you, which terrifies me because I barely know you, but the bond makes it feel like I've known you forever. I fear the same. Losing you, failing my pack, becoming the monster humans believe I am. His grip tightened slightly. And I fear that this bond, this connection, that it's somehow manipulation, that I'm taking advantage of your gratitude and your vulnerability. You're not, Aria said firmly. I chose this. I'm choosing this. Not because I'm grateful, but because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The bond flared brighter, silver and gold intertwining. What do you want from me? Kyle asked. Partnership, honesty, the chance to stand beside you instead of behind you. Aria's voice grew stronger. I want to be your equal, not your possession. I want to fight alongside you, build something new with you. I want... She stopped, afraid to say it. What? Kyle prompted gently. I want to matter to someone. To be chosen not because I'm useful or convenient, but because I'm me, because whoever I am is enough. You are enough, Kyle said fiercely. You're more than enough. You're extraordinary. Then prove it. Complete the bond with me. Choose me, and let me choose you. Kale placed his hand over her heart, and she did the same to him. Beneath her palm, she felt his heartbeat, strong and steady. I, Kale Silverclaw, King of Wolves, choose you, Aria Miller. I bind my life to yours, my strength to yours, my future to yours. From this moment until the stars fall, you are my mate, my partner, my equal. What threatens you threatens me. What strengthens you strengthens me. We are two souls with one purpose: to protect, to fight, to build something worth fighting for. Power surged from him into her, and Aria gasped. It felt like lightning and sunshine, and the first breath after drowning all at once. I, Aria Miller, moon-marked and free, choose you, Kale Silverclaw, she managed to say through the overwhelming sensation. I bind my life to yours, my light to yours, my future to yours. From this moment until my last breath, you are my mate, my partner, my anchor. Together we stand. Together we fight. Together we prove that monsters are made, not born, and we are neither. Her silver light exploded outward, meeting his golden power. The two merged, swirled, became something new, platinum bright, burning with intensity that should have hurt, but instead felt like coming home. The mark on Aria's palm blazed, and she felt a matching mark appear over Kale's heart. The bond snapped into place with such force that they both staggered, clutching each other for support. And then, Aria could feel everything, not just emotions but thoughts, memories, sensations. She felt Kyle's childhood, orphaned young and raised by wolves, felt his first transformation, painful and terrifying, felt 2 centuries of loneliness, of being respected but never truly known. And Kale felt her grief for her father, her fear for her mother, her desperate hope that she could be more than circumstances allowed. He felt every moment of terror from the night she was sold, every spike of determination that kept her moving forward. They stood in the pool, holding each other, drowning in shared experience. Gradually, the flood became a stream. The overwhelming connection settled into something manageable, still present, still powerful, but controlled. Aria pulled back enough to see Kale's face. Tears tracked through his fur, and she realized she was crying too. That was... She couldn't find words. Intense, Kale finished. More than I expected. Are you all right? I'm perfect. And she was. For the first time in her life, she felt complete. The bond hummed between them, warm and right and unbreakable. We should rest, Cal said reluctantly. The ritual takes a toll, and we have 6 days of hard preparation ahead. But neither of them moved. They stood in the pool, holding each other, sharing warmth and presence and the simple joy of not being alone. Finally, as dawn began to paint the sky, they returned to the fortress. The pack would know what they'd done. The completed bond would be obvious to anyone with supernatural senses. But Aria found she didn't care about gossip or judgment. She had a mate, a partner, a purpose. And in 6 days, they would change the world. The 6 days passed in intense preparation. Word of Aria and Kyle's completed bond spread through the pack, and while some were skeptical, most welcomed it. Marina was delighted, declaring that it was about time the Wolf King found happiness. The other girls had mixed reactions. Hannah was supportive, Rebecca cautiously optimistic, Sarah indifferent, and Claire deeply skeptical. Just don't let the bond distract you in battle, Claire warned. We need you focused. But the bond did the opposite. Aria's training improved dramatically as she learned to draw on Kale's centuries of combat experience. She moved faster, hit harder, anticipated attacks before they came. The silver light she'd manifested came easier now, and she discovered she could form it into weapons. Claws of solid energy, shields that deflected blows. The other girls progressed too. Hannah's healing touch grew strong enough to mend broken bones. Sarah could speak with any animal within a mile. Rebecca's perfect memory extended to future predictions based on pattern recognition. and Claire's dreams became so accurate that they planned the entire raid around her visions. On the seventh day, they rode for the 5 cities. The journey took 2 days of hard travel. Kale's strike team consisted of 20 wolves in human form, all experienced fighters, plus Morrigan's 5 raven shifters for aerial reconnaissance. They moved quickly, avoiding main roads, camping in hidden valleys. Through the bond, Aria felt Kale's constant vigilance. He was terrified something would go wrong, that he'd lose her before the fight even began. She sent back waves of calm confidence, and gradually he relaxed. On the evening of the second day, they camped within sight of the 5 cities. The metropolis sprawled across the horizon, thousands of lights creating an artificial constellation. Tomorrow night, during the festival, Kale reminded the team, we strike at midnight when security changes shifts. Morrigan's scouts confirm 23 moon-marked prisoners in the compound's basement. We extract them first, gather evidence second, burn the estate third. And Marcus? One of the wolves asked. If we encounter him, we capture him alive. He stands trial for his crimes. No vigilante justice. That makes us no better than him. The fighters nodded, though Aria sensed disappointment from some. They wanted blood for blood. That night, Aria couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, watching sparks rise toward stars, thinking about her mother in Millbrook, wondering if she was still alive, wondering if she'd ever see her again. Your mother is alive, Kyle said, sitting beside her. Through the bond, he'd felt her worry. I have scouts checking on her weekly. The medicine is working. She's growing stronger. Tears pricked Aria's eyes. Thank you for keeping your promise. Always. He took her hand. After tomorrow, if we survive, we'll go to her. Tell her everything. Bring her here if she wants. Or set her up somewhere safe in the cities. Whatever she needs. If we survive. We will. I've seen the future through Claire's dreams. We survive this. Claire also dreamed that someone dies. She just doesn't know who. Kale was quiet. If it comes to choosing between you and the mission, you choose the mission, Aria interrupted firmly. Those prisoners matter more than my life, more than yours. We don't abandon people to save ourselves. That's the whole point of this fight. Pride and fear warred in his expression. You're extraordinary. You know that? I learned from the best. She leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. Whatever happens tomorrow, I don't regret this. Any of it. Neither do I. They sat together until the fire burned to embers, drawing strength from their bond, preparing for the battle ahead. The Harvest Festival transformed the 5 cities into chaos and celebration. Music blared from every corner, crowds filled the streets in costumes and masks, and wine flowed freely. Perfect cover for a raid. Kale's team split into 3 groups. The wolves would assault the front gates, creating a distraction. Morrigan's ravens would disable the estate's alarm systems from above, and Aria, leading the 4 other moon-marked girls, would infiltrate through the servants' entrance and reach the prisoners. Remember, Kale said before they separated, in and out. 30 minutes maximum. If something goes wrong, abort and retreat. Through the bond, Aria felt his terror at letting her go into danger. She sent back fierce determination. I'll be fine. We'll all be fine. Trust me. I do. Always. They went their separate ways into the festival crowd. Aria's team moved like ghosts through the celebrations. 5 young women in servants' clothing, invisible among thousands of revelers. The estate loomed ahead, a massive compound surrounded by walls, guards patrolling despite the festival. Sarah, your turn, Aria whispered. Sarah closed her eyes, reaching out with her gift. Moments later, the estate's guard dogs went quiet, then turned on their handlers, barking and pulling toward the festival instead of watching for intruders. In the confusion, the girls slipped through the servants' entrance. Inside, the estate was opulent. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art worth more than entire villages. But underneath the beauty, Aria sensed something rotten. The air smelled wrong, tasted of blood and fear. Basement, Rebecca whispered, her perfect memory recalling the estate plans Morrigan's scouts had provided. 2 floors down, through the kitchens. They descended quickly, avoiding servants preparing festival feasts. The deeper they went, the worse the smell became. Then they heard it. Crying. Dozens of voices. weak with pain and despair. The basement door was locked with both physical and magical wards. Aria placed her hand against it, letting her silver light flow. The wards resisted, but the mark on her palm blazed brighter, and she felt Kale's strength flowing through their bond. The wards shattered. Inside, the scene was from nightmares. 23 women, ranging from teenagers to middle-aged, sat in cages barely large enough to stand in. Their arms were covered in scars, cuts at precise intervals for blood harvesting. Their eyes were hollow, broken by months or years of captivity. "Oh God," Hannah breathed. "We're here to help," Aria said quickly, approaching the nearest cage. "We're moon-marked like you. We're getting you out." The prisoners stared in disbelief. "It's a trick," one woman said hoarsely. "He always tricks us, gives us hope, then takes it away. Not a trick, I promise." Aria's silver light flared, breaking the lock. "We have maybe 20 minutes before guards notice. Can you walk?" The woman stumbled out of the cage, legs shaking from disuse. "Some of us. Others are too weak. Then we carry them." Aria looked at her team. "Hannah, start healing the worst cases. The rest of us start breaking locks. Move quickly." They worked frantically. Aria shattered lock after lock, her power flowing freely now. Hannah moved from prisoner to prisoner, her healing touch restoring just enough strength to walk. Sarah calmed their panic, her gift extending to human minds in extremis. Rebecca memorized each woman's face and story for future testimony. Claire watched the door, her precognitive sense alert for danger. 18 cages opened. 20, 22. "Aria!" Claire's voice was urgent. "Someone's coming. Multiple people, armed." Through the bond, Aria felt Kale's alarm. The distraction had failed. Guards were converging on the basement. "Get them to the servants' exit," Aria commanded. "I'll hold the door. You can't fight them alone." "I won't be alone." Aria touched the mark over her heart, feeling Kyle's presence. "Go. Now." "That's an order." The girls didn't want to leave her, but they recognized authority when they heard it. They began shepherding the prisoners toward the exit, supporting those too weak to walk alone. Aria turned to face the door as it burst open. 10 guards poured through, led by a familiar figure, Marcus Thornwell. "Well," he said, his cold smile firmly in place, "the wayward property returns, and you've broken my inventory. That's expensive, Aria." "They're not inventory. They're people." Aria's claws extended, silver light wrapping around her hands. "And I'm not property either. No? That mark on your palm says otherwise. My blood binding is still there, buried under your Wolf King's magic. I can feel it. I can activate it." His eyes gleamed. "Submit. Now. Or I'll make you." He spoke a word in the old language, and Aria's palm exploded with green fire. The binding, suppressed but never truly broken, surged to the surface. It wrapped around her will, trying to force submission, trying to make her kneel. But Aria was no longer the helpless girl sold in a village square. She reached through the bond, pulling Kyle's strength, pulled on her own silver light, pulled on every ounce of determination and rage and fierce joy she'd discovered in the past month, and she burned the binding away. The green fire turned silver, then detonated. The explosion knocked Marcus backward, shattered the cages, cracked the walls. When the light faded, Aria stood unmarked. The binding was gone. Truly, completely gone. "Impossible," Marcus breathed. "No," Aria's voice rang with power. "Just difficult. But I've learned something important. I'm capable of difficult things." She attacked. The fight was brief and brutal. Aria moved with speed that shocked even her body enhanced by moon-marked blood and Kale's bond. Her silver claws tore through magical shields. Her light deflected bullets. She was unstoppable. Marcus tried to run. She caught him at the stairs, slamming him against the wall. "You made me a promise," she said quietly. "In the village square, you promised my mother would be cared for if I came willingly. You lied. Business is business. This isn't business." Her claws rested against his throat. "This is justice." Through the bond, she felt Kale urging restraint, felt him reminding her that they were better than revenge. She wanted to kill Marcus, wanted to make him pay for every girl he'd taken. every life he'd destroyed. But Kale was right. They were better than this. "You're going to stand trial," Aria said, forcing calm into her voice. "You're going to face every person you've hurt, and you're going to spend whatever life you have left in a cage you built." She struck him once, precisely, and he crumpled unconscious. Outside, she heard fighting. Kyle's forces had engaged the estate guards. Through the bond, she felt his fierce joy that she was alive, unharmed, victorious. Aria dragged Marcus up the stairs, through the kitchens, toward the servants' exit where her team waited with the prisoners. "Is he dead?" Claire asked. "No, he faces justice the right way." Aria dumped Marcus at their feet. "Rebecca, get pictures of him, the basement, everything. This is our evidence." Rebecca pulled out the small camera they'd brought and began documenting frantically. Outside, wolves howled victory. The estate guards had surrendered, overwhelmed by supernatural forces they'd never expected to face. Kyle appeared in the doorway, bloodied but alive. Their eyes met across the chaos, and the bond sang with shared triumph. 23 prisoners freed, Aria reported. Evidence gathered. Primary target captured. Well done. Kale's pride flowed through their connection. Let's get everyone to safety. They evacuated quickly, disappearing into the festival crowds before city guards could respond. The prisoners were terrified but hopeful, supported by moon-marked girls who understood exactly what they'd survived. By dawn, they were safely in Governor Chen's mansion, having delivered prisoners, evidence, and Marcus himself. The governor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, looked over the documentation with growing horror. "This is monstrous," she said quietly. "I knew the blood trade existed, but this scale? He'll hang for this." "Make it public," Aria insisted. "Every detail, every victim. Make it impossible to ignore or cover up." "I will. You have my word." The governor extended her hand. "Thank you, all of you. You've given us the proof we needed to dismantle this operation permanently." Outside the governor's mansion, as the sun rose over the 5 cities, Aria stood with Kyle and her sisters, watching the city wake. "What happens now?" Hannah asked. "Now," Kale said, "we build something better. The governor has agreed to establish a sanctuary for moon-marked individuals in the mountains, protected territory where people like you can live safely, learn your gifts, be yourselves without fear." "And Marcus's organization?" Rebecca pressed. "Being dismantled as we speak. The governor is coordinating with reformers across all 5 cities. By next month, the blood trade will be illegal, with severe penalties for violation. It won't stop everyone," Claire said darkly. "No," Kale agreed. "But it's a start, and we'll be there to stop the ones who try." Aria looked at the 4 girls who'd become her sisters, at the wolf who'd become her mate, at the city spreading below them full of people who didn't know they'd just been saved. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" she said. "Yes," Kale confirmed. "The war is far from over. But today, we won a battle. We freed the prisoners. We exposed the truth. We proved that fighting back is possible." Through their bond, Aria felt his certainty that more conflicts waited ahead, more Marcus Thornwells, more corrupt organizations, more threats. But she also felt his absolute conviction that they would face it together. "So, what's our next move?" she asked. Kale smiled, a fierce, predatory expression full of determination. "We go home. We train more moon-marked. We build our coalition, and we prepare for the day when the Commerce Guild comes for revenge." "Bring it on," Aria said. Around her, her sisters echoed the sentiment. 4 voices, then 5, then 20, as Kale's wolves joined in. The sun rose higher, painting the city in gold. Somewhere in Millbrook, Aria's mother was healing, growing stronger on medicine purchased with Kale's gold. Somewhere in the mountains, Loonhaven waited, home and sanctuary and training ground. And somewhere in the darkest corners of the 5 cities, enemies were gathering, planning their counterattack. But Aria wasn't afraid anymore. She was moon-marked. She was bonded. She was free. And she was done being a victim. "With me, never again," Kyle had promised in that forest clearing weeks ago. Aria looked at her mate, her partner, her equal, and smiled. "With you," she agreed. "Never again." The wolf and the moon, united at last. Two souls with one purpose: to protect, to fight, to prove that freedom was worth any price. Their story was just beginning, and it would be legendary,